She served him coffee. The next day, he was dead, and she was the prime suspect. What started as a simple evening shift at a cozy cafe spirals into a deadly game of cat and mouse. A mysterious stranger, a deadly secret, and now, Emily's. Life is on the line. Who can she trust? Who really killed him? Will she uncover the truth before it's too late? Stay tuned to find out. Emily stood behind the counter, wiping down the last of the dinner plates as the evening shift began to wind down. The cafe was quiet, save for the occasional clinking of silverware and the hum of the espresso machine. It had been another long day, and Emily was looking forward to going home, curling up with a good book, and forgetting the stress of the busy hours. But little did she know that night would be different. The door swung open with the familiar jingle of the bell, and a man walked in. Emily didn't immediately notice him. She was lost in thought, flipping through her phone's messages. But there was something about his presence that made her glance up. He was tall, well-dressed in a crisp, black suit, the kind you see in movies or on the covers of magazines. His face was pale, his features sharp, and his eyes flickered nervously round the room as though looking for something or someone. He sat at the corner table, the farthest from the door. Emily noticed that he kept checking his watch every few seconds, his fingers tapping restlessly on the surface of the table. She couldn't help but feel a strange unease, as though something was off. But that was normal in the late hours. The cafe had seen its fair share of odd characters. Emily walked over, her routine smile plastered on her face as she approached. The table. Good evening. What can I get for you? The man looked up at her with piercing eyes. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. His voice was low, his tone tight. He hesitated for a moment before adding, "And make it quick." Emily nodded, scribbling down the order on her notepad. "Sure thing." As she turned to leave, he stopped her with a sudden, unexpected whisper, so quiet that she almost didn't catch it. "They're watching me. Don't trust anyone." She froze, feeling a chill run down her spine. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she'd heard him right. She turned back to face him, but his gaze was focused on the window, his eyes darting between the glass and the street outside. She dismissed it as paranoia, though. After all, this wasn't the first time a customer had muttered something strange. She'd had her share of eccentric people in this job. "Okay, coffee, coming right up," Emily said with a forced smile, then made her way to the counter. She made his coffee quickly, trying to shake off the weird feeling that had settled in her stomach. As she placed the black coffee in front of him, she noticed how tense his shoulders were, how his fingers gripped the cup a little too tightly. There was something desperate about him, as though he was trying to hold it together. "Here you go," she said, setting the cup in front of him. He didn't thank her. Instead, he nodded slightly, his eyes never leaving the window. Emily didn't know what to make of it, but it was none of her business. She was just here to serve. Coffee and go home. "Anything else?" she asked, ready to leave him to his thoughts. The man shook his head. "No," he said, his voice colder than before. "That'll be all." Emily left him to his drink, her eyes lingering on him for a moment before she turned back to the counter. It wasn't her place to get involved with customers' lives, especially not with someone who seemed so ... off. As the hours passed, the cafe began to empty out. Emily began to clean up, glancing over at the man every now and then. He hadn't moved from his seat. She noticed the coffee cup was still mostly full, untouched since she'd given it to him. Odd, but not enough to draw attention. Some people liked their coffee to cool down before drinking it. She finished wiping down the last of the tables, gathering her things. The man was still sitting there, his figure now partially obscured by shadows. "Sir," she called out, "we're closing for the night." He didn't respond, which wasn't unusual. Some customers didn't mind sitting until the last minute. Emily walked over to his table, ready to remind him one last time. As she approached, she noticed that his coffee cup was now empty. She was about to say something when she noticed his head slumped forward. "Sir," she asked, her voice catching in her throat. She reached out and gently tapped his shoulder. No response. She shook him a little harder, but he didn't move. Panic rose in her chest as she leaned closer. That's when she saw it, the faint, yet unmistakable blue tint to his lips. His body was stiff, unmoving. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't drunk. He was dead. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. She stumbled backward, a cold sweat breaking out across her forehead. The sound of her heart pounding was deafening, and her thoughts swirled in a fog of disbelief. How could this happen? She was the last person to see him alive. She had served him his coffee, the very coffee that had killed him. Before she could collect herself, the cafe door burst open. A uniformed officer stepped in, followed by several more. They wasted no time, rushing past her to the man's body. "Stay back, miss," one officer commanded. "This is now a crime scene." Emily stood frozen, her mind racing. How had this happened? Was she somehow involved? She'd only served him coffee. He'd whispered something strange, sure, but she had no reason to believe he was in danger. As the officers moved in, one of them approached her. "You're Emily, right? The waitress?" She nodded, her throat dry. "Yes, ... I served him coffee." The officer's gaze hardened. "We need to talk." And just like that, everything in Emily's life was turned upside down. The man was dead, and she was the prime suspect. The following hours felt like a blur, each moment stretching longer than the last. Emily sat on the hard bench in the dimly lit interrogation room, the cold metal making her uneasy. Her mind was racing, the events of the evening replaying over and over in her head. How had this happened? She had simply served him coffee. She had no idea who he was, what he did, or why he seemed so paranoid. Yet here she was, sitting in a room with police officers who seemed convinced she was involved in his death. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway outside, growing louder until the door swung open. A detective in his mid-40s walked in, his face stern and unreadable. He had a nonsense aura about him, like someone who had seen it all. He sat down across from her, his chair creaking as he leaned back, folding his arms. "Emily, I'm Detective Harris," he said, his voice steady but cold. "I'm the one in charge of this case. I need you to tell me everything you know about the man you served last night." Emily swallowed hard, her mouth dry. She had already told the officers everything she could remember. He had come in, ordered coffee, muttered something about being watched, and then left. But now, sitting in front of this detective, the weight of the situation was sinking in. "I don't know anything," she said, her voice trembling. "I just served him coffee. I don't even know his name." Harris leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You're telling me you don't know who he was?" Emily shook her head. "No, he was just a customer. He didn't give me his name. He just ordered coffee. That's it." Harris let out a frustrated sigh and looked down at the papers in front of him. "The thing is, Emily, we found a receipt with your cafe's name on it in his apartment, and your fingerprints were on his coffee cup. Emily's heart dropped into her stomach, but I don't know how that happened. I just served him the coffee. I didn't touch anything else. That's what we're trying to figure out, Harris said, his tone becoming more intense. You see, the man who died wasn't just any man. He wasn't some random customer. His name was Daniel Price, a billionaire tech mogul, one of the most influential figures in the AI industry. He was working on a highly secretive project, and we believe his death is connected to that. Emily's mind reeled. A billionaire, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. How could I have had anything to do with that? I don't even know who he was. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out, Harris said, standing up. You see, Daniel was known for his work in AI, but he had made some powerful enemies along the way. His business partner, a man named Victor Hale, is already under suspicion. But you, Emily, are the only one who had direct contact with him last night. We need to know everything you can remember. Emily felt her head spin. She couldn't understand how she had gotten involved in something so dangerous. She was just a waitress. The detective continued, I'm sure you're confused, but you need to understand that your involvement in this case is not a coincidence. Someone wanted him dead, and they're using you to cover their tracks. Emily's thoughts were a tangled mess of confusion and fear. Who would want to kill a billionaire? And why would they frame her for it? As the detective left the room, Emily was left alone with her thoughts. The police believed she was involved in something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. She was being hunted, not just by the police, but by whoever was behind Daniel's death. She had to figure out the truth, but she didn't know where to begin. She thought back to the strange words Daniel had whispered to her, the last thing he'd said before she walked away. They're watching me. Don't trust anyone. Had those words been a warning? Or had they been a desperate attempt to reach out for help? And who had been watching him? Emily stood up, her legs shaky as the weight of her new reality hit her. Her life was no longer her own. It was a dangerous game now, and she had been pulled into it, whether she liked it or not. Her only hope was to find the truth before it was too late. The police were already convinced of her guilt. The real killer was still out there, and if she didn't act fast, she would be the next one to disappear. Emily had no choice now. She had to find the answers, even if it meant running from the law. Emily stepped out of the police station, her mind clouded with fear and confusion. The crisp evening air did little to calm the storm raging inside her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she hurried down the street, her steps quick and urgent. The city felt different now, as though the very air had changed, becoming heavy with suspicion. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She had only a few hours before the police would likely return to arrest her. The detective's words echoed in her mind. Someone wanted him dead, and they're using you to cover their tracks. The weight of that statement pressed on her, suffocating her with dread. How had she become entangled in this web of lies and deceit? She didn't know where to turn, but one thing was clear. She couldn't trust the authorities. Not anymore. They had already made up their minds, and she was just a pawn in their investigation. She had to find another way, she thought, back to the only lead she had, Daniel's cryptic warning about someone watching him. Was it possible that someone else knew the truth? She didn't know, but she had to find out. Her first instinct was to go back to the cafe, to retrace her steps and see if there was anything she had missed. Maybe there was a clue hidden in the place where everything had begun. As she arrived at the cafe, She hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. The bell jingled as she stepped inside, and the familiar scent of coffee and pastries filled the air. It was almost comforting, but it didn't take long for her to realize that everything had changed. The cafe now felt like a haunted place, a reminder of what had happened the night before. The owner, Mr. Clark, was standing behind the counter, wiping down a glass. His face was grim, his eyes darting nervously when he saw her. "Emily, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low. "You're not supposed to be here." "The police, I know," Emily interrupted, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "But I need to ask you something. Please, I need your help." Mr. Clark hesitated, looking around nervously before leaning in closer. "I don't know what happened, Emily, but I know you didn't do this. You've got to stay away from the police. They're already watching you. I've heard things. Bad things." Emily frowned. "What do you mean? What have you heard?" Mr. Clark glanced around again, making sure no one was listening. He lowered his voice even more. "There's talk. People are saying Daniel wasn't just some businessman. He was into something ... dangerous. He was working on a secret project, something that could change the world. But someone didn't want that to happen." Emily felt her pulse quicken. A secret project? What kind of project? Mr. Clark shook his head. "I don't know, Emily, but the people he was working with, they're not the kind of people you want to get involved with." "Who are they?" Emily pressed, desperate for answers. Mr. Clark looked torn, his face a mask of guilt and fear. "I can't tell you, but I can help you get out of town, get away from this mess." "No," Emily said firmly, shaking her head. "I need to know the truth. I need to find out what happened to him, who killed him." Mr. Clark hesitated for a long moment before finally speaking. "Fine, but you need to be careful. There's a man. Victor Hale. He's Daniel's business partner. He's dangerous, Emily. If anyone's behind this, it's him." "Victor Hale," Emily repeated, her mind racing. "Where can I find him?" Mr. Clark seemed to consider this for a moment, before nodding. "I don't know for sure, but I've heard he's been hanging around a building downtown. It's an old warehouse. No one goes there anymore, but it's worth checking out." "Thank you," Emily said, a surge of hope filling her chest. She didn't have much time, but this could be the break she needed. She turned to leave, but Mr. Clark stopped her. "Emily, be careful. If Hale's involved, you're in real danger. Don't trust anyone." His words weighed heavily on her as she stepped out into the night. She had a name now, Victor Hale. It was a lead, and it was all she had. She wasn't going to stop until she uncovered the truth, even if it meant putting herself in harm's way. She had no choice. She had to clear her name, and the only way to do that was to find the real killer. The city was dark, the streets eerily quiet as she made her way toward the warehouse. The night felt oppressive, as though the very air was thick with secrets. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps as she walked, her mind filled with questions. What kind of secret project had Daniel been working on? And why had Victor Hale killed him? Or was someone else pulling the strings, using Hale as a pawn? As she reached the warehouse, she saw that the building was exactly as Mr. Clark had described it, abandoned. Its windows dark and lifeless. She pushed open the rusted metal door and stepped inside, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. The warehouse smelled of dust and decay, the air heavy with the weight of forgotten things. But Emily didn't have time to think about the surroundings. She was here for answers, and she wouldn't leave until she got them. Her footsteps grew louder as she moved deeper into the building. The silence around her felt suffocating, and then she heard it. A faint sound, like a door creaking open in the distance. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't alone. Emily's pulse quickened as she crept further into the warehouse. The distant sound of the creaking door echoed in her ears, followed by soft footsteps. She froze, her body tense, every nerve on edge. She couldn't afford to be caught. Whoever was in here, they were connected to Daniel's death, and she needed to find out who they were before it was too late. Her eyes scanned the dimly lit room, the shadows stretching long across the cracked concrete floor. There was an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind outside, or the distant hum of traffic. She cautiously stepped toward the source of the noise, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. Her mind raced, considering all the possibilities. Had Victor Hale followed her here? Or was it someone else, someone who had been watching her from the moment she'd served Daniel his last coffee? Her fingers tightened around the small flashlight in her hand, the only thing illuminating the path ahead. She reached the corner of the warehouse, her heart hammering in her chest. There was a small office at the far end of the building, the light faintly visible through a cracked window. She moved silently, inching closer until she could make out muffled voices. One of them was a man's, deep and steady. The other, unmistakably familiar, was Victor Hale's. Emily's breath hitched. She hadn't expected to find him here, but now that she had, there was no turning back. She had to know what was going on. She moved quietly, peeking through the window, her breath fogging the glass slightly. Inside, she saw two men sitting at a desk. One of them was Victor Hale, but the other man was unfamiliar, a tall, broad-shouldered figure, his face shadowed under the brim of his cap. Hale was speaking urgently, his voice low and tense. "We can't afford to let her get any closer," Hale said. "If she figures out what's really going on, we're all finished." Emily's mind raced as she strained to hear more. She knew they were talking about her, but what did Hale mean by figuring out what's going on? What was the secret that they were trying to keep hidden? The man sitting next to Hale leaned forward, his face hidden in the shadows. "You need to stop her before it's too late," the man said, his voice gruff. "She's already connected to the murder. If we don't silence her now, she'll ruin everything." Emily's blood ran cold. She hadn't just been framed. They were planning to kill her too. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just running from the police, she was running from the people who had orchestrated Daniel's death, people who would stop at nothing to cover their tracks. But why? What was it that Daniel had uncovered, and why was it worth killing for? Hale stood up abruptly, slamming his fist against the desk. "I know what's at stake," he growled. "But we're not dealing with an ordinary person here. She's got connections. She's smarter than I thought. We'll have to find another way to handle her." Emily's thoughts were a whirlwind. Connections, smarter than he thought. How much did they know about her? Had they been watching her all along? She couldn't afford to wait any longer. She needed to act fast, or she'd become their next victim. She backed away from the window, her mind spinning. She had to get out of here, and she had to get the police involved, but she couldn't trust them anymore. Not with the way they were handling her case. They were part of the system that was protecting Hale and his associates. She needed to find someone she could trust, someone who would believe her story. She turned, ready to leave, when suddenly she heard a voice, low and familiar, behind her. "Going somewhere, Emily?" Her heart skipped a beat. She spun around, her flashlight shaking in her hand. There, standing in the shadows, was the figure she least expected, Detective Harris. He stepped into the light, his expression unreadable. "You didn't think you could run from this, did you?" he said, his voice cold. "You've been digging into things you don't understand. And now you've got yourself tangled in something much bigger than you." Emily's mind raced. She had thought Harris was different, that he was just another cop trying to do his job. But now everything she had suspected came crashing down. He was part of it. Harris wasn't here to help. He was here to make sure she didn't get the answers she was looking for. "What do you want from me?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. Harris's lips curled into a slight smile, though there was no warmth in it. "I want you to stop asking questions. I want you to stay out of this. If you don't, things will only get worse for you." Emily's mind was spinning. She had been right all along. Harris was no different from Hale or anyone else involved in this. She had no allies here, no one she could trust. The only person she had left to rely on was herself. "You're not going to stop me," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I will find out what happened to Daniel. I will find out who killed him." Harris's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing. "Then you'll die trying." Emily took a step back, her hand brushing against the cold metal of a nearby crate. She knew that if she stayed here any longer, she wouldn't make it out alive. She turned and bolted for the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to get out, and she had to get help, but she knew one thing for sure. The closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous this would become. She was no longer just a waitress caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a target, and the people after her would stop at nothing to silence her. Emily's heart was pounding in her chest as she sprinted through the darkened streets of the city. Her breath came in short, frantic gasps as the night air cut through her like ice. She had to get away from Harris, away from the warehouse, away from the people who were trying to destroy her. She didn't know where she was going, but all that mattered was escaping this nightmare, finding the truth and exposing the ones responsible for Daniel's death. She couldn't go back to the police, not after everything Harris had said. If the detective was involved, then the system itself was compromised, and she had no one left to trust. The only option now was to go rogue. She needed to find someone who wasn't part of the corrupt web that surrounded Daniel's death, someone with the resources to help her uncover the truth. As she turned down a narrow alleyway, Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She fumbled for it, pulling it out to see an unfamiliar number. For a moment, she hesitated. Was it the police? Was it Harris? But then she saw the message flash across the screen. "I know what you're looking for. Meet me at the old docks. At midnight. Don't trust anyone." Jay, her pulse quickened. Jay, who was this person? Could they be trusted? She didn't have much of a choice. She had no other leads, no other way of getting answers. Her only hope now was to meet this mysterious person at the docks and see where it led. She quickly typed a response. "I'll be there." The old docks were on the edge of the city, an abandoned industrial area that had long since been forgotten. By most of the population, it was the perfect place to meet in secret, a place where no one would be able to see or hear them. But it was also a place of danger, especially for someone like her. The night felt heavier as she made her way to the docks. The air was thick with salt and decay, the smell of old fish and rust clinging to the silence. The moon hung low, casting long shadows across the empty, crumbling buildings. Emily's footsteps echoed in the quiet. each step bringing her closer to the unknown. When she reached the meeting spot, she stopped, scanning the area for any sign of movement. She saw nothing. No one was there. She checked her watch. Midnight. Where was Jay? Her instincts screamed at her to be cautious. She couldn't let her guard down. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she heard a sound, a door creaking open. She whipped around, her heart leaping into her throat. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, tall and imposing. Emily's breath caught in her chest as the figure came into the light. It was a woman, her face obscured by a dark hood. She looked young, maybe in her late 20s, with sharp features and piercing eyes. "You're Emily, right?" the woman asked, her voice low but confident. "Yes," Emily replied, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "Who are you?" The woman took a step forward, her eyes scanning the area as if checking for anyone else. "My name's Jasmine. I work with someone who can help you, but you need to trust me." Emily frowned, skepticism flooding her mind. "Why should I trust you? How do I know you're not working with them?" Jasmine hesitated, her gaze softening for a brief moment before she spoke again. "Because I've been watching them too. I know what they've done to you, to Daniel. You're not the first person they've tried to destroy, and you won't be the last. But I can help you stop them." Emily's mind raced. She knows about Daniel. She knows about the people after me. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jasmine looked around again before pulling something from her jacket, a small flash drive. She handed it to Emily, who took it reluctantly. "This has everything you need. It contains documents, recordings, and all the proof you'll need to expose Victor Hale, Harris, and everyone else involved in Daniel's death. They can't hide from this anymore." Emily's hands shook as she took the drive, her eyes scanning Jasmine's face. "Why are you helping me?" Jasmine didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gave a small, almost sad smile. "Because I believe in justice, and because someone has to stop them before they do more damage." Before Emily could say anything else, Jasmine turned and began to walk away. "Wait," Emily called out, but the woman didn't stop. "Where are you going? What's going to happen to you?" Jasmine paused, glancing over her shoulder. "I'll be fine. They won't come for me, but they'll come for you. You've got to act fast. Expose them before they can destroy everything." And just like that, she disappeared into the darkness. Emily stood there for a moment, the weight of what Jasmine had given her sinking in. She had everything she needed, the truth, the proof. She could take down Hale and Harris and the entire network of corruption that had framed her, that had killed Daniel. But there was no time to waste. She had to act now. As Emily made her way back to the city, she couldn't help but wonder about the woman who had helped her. Who was Jasmine really, and what did she stand to gain from all of this? But those questions would have to wait. She had a bigger mission now. Expose the truth and clear her name once and for all. She couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. The clock was ticking, and she was running out of time as she walked into the night. She knew one thing for sure. The battle for justice had just begun.